I'd like to introduce Todd Bernhard, Product Marketing Director of Cloudcheckr. Todd has been with Cloudcheckr for nearly 4 years, and before that, he was an evangelist and instructor for Sun Microsystems for over 16 years. Todd.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here, and I've been watching the whole event and learning a lot. It's great. So what we're going to talk today about is total visibility for cost optimization and allocation, and should be able to see my screen. So we're going to talk about the big picture, right? Which is it has a few meanings. There's cloud computing itself, but also giving you the big picture when it comes to your cloud usage. And that means multiple accounts, and quite frankly, it could be across multiple clouds. So our focus is on cost optimization, but also cost allocation, which could be chargeback or showback, or actual invoices if you're a service provider. So you can pass those invoices along to your departments or to end users. We'll also talk a little bit about automation, because really that's the only way to do this at scale. Now, as was mentioned, I've spent about 4 years here in product marketing at Cloudcheckr in Rochester, New York. I've also taught here at RIT and at Carnegie Mellon University. Before all that, I spent about 16 years at Sun Microsystems. So that was a hardware vendor, but even back then, our motto, our tagline was, "The network is the computer." So we were sort of foreshadowing cloud computing. So Gartner says that the cloud is great, and believe me, it is. There's no going back, but that people could be overspending by as much as 70%. That's a big number. The reason is the promise of the cloud is great, right? It's very attractive. You only pay for what you use and not a penny more. But in reality, you're really paying for what you order, whether you use it or not, right? So it's not just, it's kind of like going to a restaurant and at the end of the meal saying, you know what, I didn't eat this broccoli, I'd like to not have to pay for it. Well, they can't reserve that, right? So you're paying for what you order, whether you use it or not. That's why you need to do right sizing and look after idle and unused resources and really just shut them down. Now, this is one of my favorite quotes from the founder of Macy's, John Wanamaker. "Half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I don't know what half." And that's the ultimate challenge. So that's where a tool like Cloudcheckr can come in and help you identify where you're wasting money. So this is my favorite screen in Cloudcheckr. It's kind of like what I call the home page. It's the first page I would recommend you go to, and you would you check that out, see right away, oh, I'm wasting tens of thousands of dollars, and that can be idle resources, as we mentioned, and you get to decide what does idle mean. So Amazon might have a definition of what idle is. It might be 40% or less utilization, but you can change that to 25%, 10%, 3%. You get to decide. Completely unused resources. So this happens a lot where you might create something and then you create a server, you create some storage, you connect them, and then you're all done with the server and you get rid of the server, but you forgot about the storage. And it's just sitting there unused, not even attached to anything. But remember, just like that broccoli, you're paying for it. So unused resources. Misprovisioned resources and older resources. And I want to give Amazon credit. In the over a decade that AWS has been around, they have lowered prices more than 60 times, 60. So in a way, just by standing still, you could spend less on Amazon. But one of the ways to do that, to save money, is to upgrade to the latest equipment, the latest generation, because they'll make the newer stuff available faster, potentially, with more resources, and often at a lower price. So you got to stay up on that. But really where the money is, the big picture, is reserve purchase recommendations. So we'll talk in detail about that. So in the data center, again, remember my background at Sun is really in the data center. You never wanted to go above 90% utilization, right? Because if you were at 90% and then suddenly the Wall Street Journal writes about your business, or it's Black Friday and you're a retail business, you have nowhere to go. You're at your maximum capacity. And in the data center, it's much harder to add more equipment. You have to You know, you have a procurement process, you put it out for bid, the equipment arrives, someone has to unbox it, ship it, plug it in, and so on. So it's a lot harder to add resources in the data center. Whereas in the cloud, you can literally spin up resources with a click of a button. You really are encouraged in the cloud to operate at high levels of utilization because it's no big deal to add capacity on demand. In fact, you can automatically scale programmatically. So the flip side of that is, well, what about when I'm not using my resources? And so Cloudcheckr has this heat map, which is a visual tool that shows you red versus blue in intensity. And as we see here, this is not the weekend. This is, for some reason, Wednesday and Thursdays, we are very low utilization. So in this scenario, maybe we're a medical supply company and most of our physicians golf on Thursday. I don't know, you know your business. But this tool will show you what your utilization rates are on an hour-by-hour basis for the week. And then you can take action based on this, and with our automation tools, say, all right, well, in midday on Wednesday and through Thursday, I'm going to shut down some resources programmatically. Now, there's this other concept, and this is really not very technical. This is really much more of a financial consideration. And this has to do with reservation discounts, on-demand usage, and something called spot instances. So your baseline, right, which is in that kind of royal blue color at the bottom, that is the predictable level of computing that you use every day, all week, all month, maybe even for months on end. And if you know that level of predictability, you can make an arrangement, basically, make a deal with Amazon and say, listen, I'm going to use this much level of computing power for an entire year, or maybe even 3 years. And the longer you commit to Amazon, the better the discount you'll get, up to 60 or 70% discount. So it's really in your interest to establish what is that baseline that you rarely go below. And then on top of that, in the dark blue, that's the on-demand where, you know, sometimes developers are spinning things up. Sometimes there's a peak, it's Black Friday, etc. And you do need that extra computing power. And then finally, in green, those are what is called batch or occasional use or low priority instances. Things that you don't care too much about. If they run tonight or tomorrow, it's not a big problem, but they do have to run sometime this week, because you're basically putting out a request, almost like an auction, like eBay, and saying, I'm willing to pay this much for this much computing power. If I get it, great. If I don't, I can manage it. And if I get it and it gets pulled away from me because someone outbids me, my software can handle that as well. So there's different levels of demand. So getting back to the reserved instance recommendation, this is where, again, the biggest savings can be, 60, 70%. You are making a commitment, though. You're making a 1-year or 3-year commitment to Amazon, and you can pay either all upfront, partial upfront, or nothing upfront. And of course, the more you pay upfront, the better the discount. So Cloudcheckr will display all those permutations to give you the best recommendation. You, again, you know your business, you know the best way to spend your money. Maybe, you know, you don't have your little cash strap now, but you want to commit, you could do nothing up front. Or we have this a lot of times in the public sector. You're in education, you're in government, and your budget is one of those, use it or lose it. And if you don't spend it, it's gone. So you can take your available budget at the end of the year and put it into reserved instances, which will help you save money next year and don't count against next year's budget. So it's a clever way to do that. But here's the thing, a lot of tools will do RI recommendations, including native tools from Amazon, Cost Explorer, but they only go 7, 30, or 60 days in the past. What Cloudcheckr lets you do is look back 30, 60, 90, or 180 days. So that's up to 6 months. If you think about it, if you're going to make a 1-year or 3-year commitment, you want to look back in time more than 2 months, especially if you look at the past 6 months and what's happened in the world. The computing usage has changed dramatically. So if you're only looking at the last 2 months, you're not getting the big picture, which we talked about. Now, the other thing, a lot of our customers at Cloudcheckr are service providers. These are resellers, cloud solution providers, people who basically buy cloud computing from Amazon or other vendors and then resell that along with value-added services. So they need a way to charge for that. They need a way to make money. And a lot of these guys, they only make money on small margins. They have less single-digit margins, so everything really is important. So what Cloudcheckr lets them do is buy that computing power and maybe purchase some reserved instances on their own, or savings plans, another option. And they purchase those and they decide how to farm those out to their customers. So they're taking a little bit of risk, but there's a much greater reward, typically 20–30% in profit. So we find a lot of service providers like Cloudcheckr because they can do what's called arbitrage, where they're buying those discounts, they're making a long-term commitment, expecting that their customers will be able to use that computing power. But I'll tell you, even if you're an enterprise, a lot of enterprises, especially big ones, need to generate invoices or reports for chargeback or showback, or even sometimes called shame back, where they need to shame other departments and sort of say, well, here's how much computing in the cloud you've been doing, and we're taking care of it for you, but you should know. And those reports can be generated in PDF, CSV for use in Excel, of course, HTML, web, and just about everything we do is available via our public API. Now, with a name like Cloudcheckr, we have a lot of best practice checks. We have over 600 of them, and they're categorized by security, cost, availability, usage. And then we also bring in AWS Trusted Advisor checks, and we bring in Azure Advisor and Azure Security Center checks too. So it gives you truly one single screen to check for security, cost, availability, and usage. And then they're sorted by a priority, red, orange, yellow, which you can change if you disagree. And then blue is more informational and green is configured correctly. And what you see in the middle there, you see the configure check option. So this is what I mentioned earlier, is that you and I may have a different idea of what idle means. So Amazon thinks it's 40% or less is idle. You might want to change that to 30 or 10. Amazon does that, I believe, over 14 days, no matter, that you can't change that. We let you change that. It could be 2 days, could be 30 days. Another nice thing we do, especially if you're trying to do anything at scale, is self-healing automation. So a lot of our best practice checks and our right sizing opportunities have a little button that says fix now or request fix. And if you choose fix now, Cloudcheckr can go ahead and make that change for you, whether it's a security change or a cost right sizing change. So it's quite powerful. You don't have to leave the Cloudcheckr screen and go into either the command line or the Amazon console. You can just click a button and have it happen. Now, sometimes people right now, and please submit your questions, a lot of times people at this point will say, oh my gosh, I don't trust my junior engineers to do that. Maybe there's a reason I wanted that S3 bucket to be public. So in that case, we support something called workflow automation. With workflow automation, you have a chance to click a different button that says request fix. And with request fix, it goes to your boss, and your boss says, oh, I agree, click yes and fix. Or they'll send it back down with some changes or some explanation. And then the other button is called always fix now. And you see that on the screen right there. This is really cool and really powerful. So as you know, S3 buckets are a big source of concern for security. By default, they're locked down, but sometimes administrators will unlock them. And then unfortunately, some people might put private data in there. So what Cloudcheckr can do is it can detect that issue. And even if you're asleep, if you selected always fix now, and some developer makes a bucket public at 7 o'clock at night, and you've gone home, Cloudcheckr will detect that, fix it for you because you said always fix, and send you an email saying, hey, this happened last night, but don't worry, I took care of it. So it's very powerful and very useful. Another thing that Cloudcheckr does is we maintain all of our reports for as long as you want, up to 7 years. So really, Cloudcheckr is about 8 years old. So we've been doing this since the beginning. So you can go back in time, whether it's a security and compliance report or a cost savings report, you can say, hey, what was our security posture December 31st, 2016? Because somebody is saying that we had a breach, and I want to be able to prove that we didn't, or that we met these standards. So it could make a big difference if you ever get audited or have a security breach. And the same thing for cost reports. If you want to go back in time and say, well, Cloudcheckr said we could save this much, let's compare it to how much we spent. And with our compliance solution, we have something called total compliance. We actually track 35 different standards and regulations. So some of these are government standards, some of these are US government, some are Saudi Arabia, Singapore, other countries, Australia. Some of these are industry standards like PCI, which is the payment card industry. So those are credit cards that applies globally. So almost all the big standards, you can see their logos there, NIST for FedRAMP, SOC 2, of course, Center for Internet Security, CIS. I mentioned PCI, New York State, where we are, Nevada Gaming. So we think we have the most complete library of compliance standards, and we score you over time. So again, you can prove your compliance. So, this is all about the big picture and total visibility. We're focused today on AWS. We're honored to have John host us, but you're finding a lot of companies are getting their foot wet in at least one or more or two or more clouds. So it is nice to have a solution like Cloudcheckr that can be your single console and bring in all the data from the three big clouds. The last thing I want to show is our dashboard capability. So you can decide the views that you care about. We have tons of roles and responsibility features. So, my job might be security, your job might be finance. You can create your own dashboard that shows the things you care about. So you want to see cost over time, you want to see cost savings, you want to see multi-cloud total spend. I want to see security and compliance. And we can create those dashboards and drag them around, and it's quite powerful and fun. And with that, I'm going to open up to John and open up to Q&A. And thank you for your time.
Oh, Todd, thank you so much. I know Cloudcheckr's product. I use it. I actually have it installed, mess around. I've been using it for years. I do have a bunch of questions. My very first question is, you had shame backs. Is that actually an option in the console now? I haven't been there.
No, that's a newer term that we're using, but no, it's just inventory. Whether you use it as something to actually bill somebody as an invoice, or chargeback, or shameback, or showback, that's more of a business issue. But you bring up a good point. All of this is white labeled. So a lot of our service provider customers, absolutely, the first thing they do is they change the Cloudcheckr logo to be their logo, and they change the color scheme from our blue and green, which you see all around me, to their own color scheme, and that's totally fine with us. The funny thing is, John, back when we had events like AWS summits and reInvents in person, people would come up to our booth and they would say, that looks familiar, but we use a different product. And the reality is they use Cloudcheckr, they just don't know it, because that reseller changes it. Thanks.
I did the same thing before joining AWS, and we used it. I rebranded it, just white labeled a lot of it, made it look a little more natural, changed all the colors as people kind of got familiar with that one. I like your check in the background, the check light back there, by the way. Your buddy Jarrett there hooked me up with my nice long sleeve for my workout, so I really appreciate that. Let me get to a couple of questions. What permissions do I need to give Cloudcheckr to access my account?
I'm glad you asked that, because I mentioned that we have this self-healing automation capability that requires read-write access. But if you don't want that, a lot of customers are a little wary. They don't necessarily trust another provider to be able to make changes to their configuration. So at first, all we need is read access. We create a role dedicated to Cloudcheckr. You can lock it down in terms of what it can do. The important thing is we never have access to your data, right? We only have access to your metadata, right? Which is a fancy way of saying the data about the data. We know how much space you're using, what your permissions are, but we don't have access to those raw data files, so you don't have to worry about that. And it's only once you start trusting us and seeing our recommendations and saying, boy, every time Cloudcheckr says this, I go and manually do it. I want to take advantage of that Fix Now button. Then you would give us read-write access.
I actually like that Fix Now button. I've used that in the past. I think that was one of your best features that you put out there. Originally it was, hey, here's your issues, and then you kind of manually do it. Now you have the Fix Now, the automation. You can time it. You can figure out when you want to do it. So I really like that feature. I have time for another question, and I'm keeping track of time here because we do have a panel event. We've got some other cool things. I know we're rounding out the presentation here, but I don't want to miss anything. So Todd, what kind of ROI can I expect, and how soon will I see those results?
Thank you. I didn't mention that, but our customers tell us that they're typically saving 30% or more with our recommendations. Cloudcheckr sort of pays for itself immediately, because you start running it and you identify those idle and unattached and unused resources that will save X number times the cost of Cloudcheckr, during the trial. We have a 14-day free trial. We've had people sign up to become customers before that 14 days are up because they're convinced. And the fact that we do cost and security in one tool means that security is not really a cost sink, right? It's built in, so it's I like to say it's security that pays for itself, because the cost savings features of Cloudcheckr will more than cover, if you were looking for just a security solution.